This is Bob Oliphant from the Westford Historical Society and Museum, bringing you episode 33 of season 4 of the Westford Wardsman podcast. The Westford Wardsman newspaper was part of Turner's Public Spirit, a weekly newspaper in Ayer a century ago. In this episode, we'll be reading the Wardsman for the week ending Saturday, August 19th, 1911, and I'll elaborate on what was happening in Westford that week. The week starts with the annual outing and reunion. The annual reunion of the members of Troop F Cavalry Association took place on Thursday of last week and was carried out under the most pleasant conditions. The weather was most favorable, and even if it was pretty warm. All the events of the day took place at Whitney Park and at the town hall. There was a good attendance of the townspeople and from the surrounding towns. Troop F had a number of members from neighboring towns. In the morning, the clay pigeon shoot, which was a new feature, took the attention of many. This was participated in by a good number. Edward Abbott was the winner and received the trophy of a beautiful silver cup. A concert by the Chelmsford Band took place during the morning. It always amazes me that they would have a clay pigeon shoot, that's with shotguns, at Whitney Park in the center of Westford. Shortly preceding 1:30, the company formed in line headed by the band and marched to the town hall, where dinner was served. This was managed by the men of the Unitarian Church. After all had done full justice to this meal, Captain Sherman H. Fletcher, president of the day, called to order and spoke briefly and interestingly. He spoke of the fact that there had been no deaths in the membership during the year. Captain Fletcher called for any among the company who were members of the old organization of the old Troop F, and 6 responded by rising. He also spoke feelingly of the absence of Captain H.W. Wilson, who was absent, being very ill at his home in Carlisle. I believe Troop F was formed about the time of the Civil War, so those 6 men that stood were old enough to have fought in the war. Captain Wilson was seriously injured recently by being kicked by a horse, and at first his life was despaired of, but he is now convalescing slowly with all that skill and care can do. A message had come from him earlier in the day, bringing his greetings and regret that he could not be present, but said he should be with the gathering in thought. By a hearty, unanimous vote, one of the members was appointed to telephone from the hall to Captain Wilson's home, bearing a message of sympathy and hearty greetings from the members in session. Edward Fisher was appointed to attend to this duty. Any long or extended speech making was dispensed with, and Captain Fletcher introduced most felicitously S. Thompson Blood of Concord Junction, a member of the association. Mr. Blood is a whole host in himself and gave a group of stories in his own inimitable way, and by special request gave, quote, The Country Store, end quote, by James Whitcomb Riley. At Whitney Park, a second band concert took place, and another feature of the afternoon was a ball game between the YMCA of Lowell and Chelmsford Center, with a score of 7-5 in favor of the latter. The game went 10 innings. At the business meeting, the following officers were chosen: Captain Sherman Fletcher, Westford President; Captain H.W. Wilson, Carlisle, Vice President; Charles Bartlett, Chelmsford, Treasurer; Edward Fisher, Westford, Secretary; Caleb Smith, Lowell; Williams Quigley, North Chelmsford; Everett Williams, Groton; and Edward Fisher, Westford, Standing Committee. Next, we have the Westford Center section. Henry M. Shorey had the misfortune to lose a valuable young horse last week. Mrs. Orion V. Wells and daughter Elizabeth are enjoying a 2-week sojourn at Bakersfield, Vermont, which is Dr. Wells' hometown. Alex McDougall is improving his cozy home on Boston Road with a piazza. Motorman John Sherlock had a day off duty on Tuesday and enjoyed a trip with Mrs. Sherlock to Worcester. Charles O. Prescott has returned from a 2-week stay at Manomet with Reverend and Mrs. C.R. Marshall. I believe he was a former pastor of the Union Congregational Church, now the PCA building. The latter are now staying at Old Orchard Beach, and Mr. Prescott joins them there for this weekend. Principal Dexter Cogshaw of the Academy is preparing to move from the Fred A. Hildreth cottage into a part of Mrs. Helen K. Frost's house. This was the house at 12 Main Street, and Mrs. Frost was the widow of William E. Frost, a former Westford Academy principal who died in 1904, and the Frost School is named for him. Mrs. Frost lived on the second floor and rented out the first floor until she died in 1918. Her son then inherited the house, and it was sold to the trustees of Westford Academy, who used it to house additional principals from Westford Academy, notably William C. Rodenbush, who lived there from 1912 to 1937. During the storm last Tuesday afternoon, the electric car was put out of commission near Bannister's Corner. That's the junction of Lowell and Providence Roads, as it was making the last trip of the day toward Brookside. This caused the omission of the two early trips on Wednesday, after which the regular trips were made. The Herbert Hildreths are enjoying a sojourn at their camp at Forge Pond, and during this week, the Fred Hildreths, Herbert's parents, have been staying at the former's village home. Reverend and Mrs. David Wallace are gathering recreation and inspiration at the summer meetings at Northfield, and Houghton G. Osgood has also been spending a part of the week with them. Those are summer church meetings. Arthur E. Day conducted the single service of the day on Sunday evening at the Congregational Church. It was a well-sustained meeting with, quote, the beginnings of temperance, quote, as the subject. Mrs. Cyril A. Blaney assisted the service with a well-rendered solo. Mr. and Mrs. Edward Fisher are spending a vacation at Swampscott and Camden, Maine. Owing to the demand for summer fiction, 20 new volumes of good readable stories have been added to the library. The Westford baseball team took the laurels at Ayer last Saturday in the game between Shirley and Westford with the score of 12-9. Some people have been heard to regret that Whitney Park was not used more. One of the pleasant afternoons this week, the writer observed taking place at one time some good sets of tennis with onlookers going on at the tennis court, a good game of croquet by members of the croquet club, a crowd of boys on the baseball diamond were doing practice work, and a good group of children were enjoying the swings, and many times this is largely duplicated. It would seem that at such times it fully justified its aim of beautiful recreation and enjoyment. The next section is called Fire. The bells rang an alarm for fire about 10 o'clock last Monday forenoon, which proved to be at the Virgil Mitchell house at Minot's Corner. That's the junction of Boston and Littleton Roads. The origin of the fire was such that it had an ominous start, and had it not been discovered at a time of day when the family were right at hand, would have proved serious. The house has an old-fashioned central chimney with brick oven. This oven had been bricked up, but the fire flue from it opened into the kitchen chimney, which formed a blind pocket in which a mass of soot had collected. This got afire, and the bricks became so heated that they set fire to the woodwork outside. Mrs. Mitchell, who was busy nearby, began to smell smoke, and simultaneously flames broke through the partition. The family used a hand extinguisher and with a neighbor's telephone summoned help. Several members of the Edward M. Abbott Hose Company responded and did good work in putting out the fire, with the result of a damage of not perhaps exceeding $50. The next paragraph is called Anniversary. Mr. and Mrs. Arthur E. Day observed the 10th anniversary of their wedding day very pleasantly at their home last Monday. Owing to the advent 2 weeks previous of a little daughter, Viola M. Day, born July 31st, 1911, Into the family circle, the affair was a quiet one and somewhat in the nature of a surprise to Mrs. Day, but was full of the atmosphere of loving home cheer. Mrs. Moran, whose very name is synonymous with household helpfulness, carried out the successful plans for the occasion. Arthur Edward Day and Margaret Louisa Gunter were married at Wollaston, Ontario, the home and native place of the bride, August 14, 1901. Of the 5 children born to them, they have been called upon to part with 3 by death. The next section is the About Town section. Our bright and good-natured Seth W. Bannister is busy these vacation days taking the school census by appointment of the school committee. Gregor H. McGregor of Westford Corner has resigned his position as night watchman at Brookside Mills, which he has held for many years, and Jean St. John has been pointed out to this sleepless duty. 2 foxes have recently been playing hide-and-seek around the poultry yard of J. Willard Fletcher, and J. Willard Fletcher gathered to himself a rifle shooting apparatus and went forth to hide and seek. The foxes now hide and seek no more around the henhouse door. That's a little of Samuel Taylor's poetry. Miss Wright was present at her summer home the evening of the fatal lamp explosion which caused the death of Miss McKenna, who had been employed at the old homestead for 4 years. With characteristic kindness, Mrs. Wright accompanied Miss McKenna to the hospital in Lowell, paying all the hospital and funeral expenses and the added expense of a private room at the hospital. The recent rains have sharpened the appetite of the potato bugs on the Prairie Farm. The owner, that's Amos Poley, is administering an antidote for too much appetite. The next couple paragraphs are called Adding Improvements. The new laid wall that surrounds the land at the corner of Lowell and Brookside Roads was the gift of William, it says, but it should actually be John Harris McBride, in memory of his wife, Amy Elizabeth Wright, who had strong attachments for this old historic homestead. This is the house that's still there at 120 Lowell Road. She being a sister of Miss Ella Wright and niece of Miss Sarah Richardson, who also have occupied that house. Mrs. McBride died about a year ago at her home in Cleveland, Ohio. Workmen are now busy with other improvements at this old homestead. These improvements are in charge of Augustus F. Whidden, the well-known Oak Hill landscape gardener. The next section is the Graniteville section. Charles G. Sargent's Sons Corporation, makers of textile machinery, have started on full-time commencing this week after having been on short time for several weeks. The mills of the Abbott Worsted Company commenced on their new schedule of 54 hours per week on Monday, August 14th, but the mill will not run on Saturdays until further notice. Word has been received recently here from Fred Wall, who with his brother William and wife are now in San Francisco, California, that they are getting along finely, but were somewhat disturbed by the earthquake that they had out there a short time ago. Mr. and Mrs. Charles Dudevore and little son Russell have returned from their vacation, which was spent in St. John, New Brunswick. Their vacation was saddened owing to the death of their daughter, Bernadette, which occurred in New Brunswick. Mr. and Mrs. Frank P. Hawks and son Wesley have returned home after a few days spent with Mr. and Mrs. Wesley Hawks, those are Frank's parents, of this village. Mr. and Mrs. P. Henry Harrington were auto guests of Mr. and Mrs. Walter Merritt of Westford on a trip to Boston and vicinity last week. William Wall and Miss Rachel Wall spent a few days last week visiting friends in Fitchburg. Miss Abby Larkin of North Chelmsford, who is stopping with Mr. and Mrs. Henry Provost, is very much improved and hopes to be able to return home soon. Master Freddie Robinson of Westford, but formerly of this village, underwent a very successful operation this week in having his adenoids removed. Dr. Sherman performed the operation. Miss Catherine Conley of this village has returned from her vacation, which was spent in Lynn. Next we have the Forge Village section. The two new houses which are being erected by Abbott and Company in Orchard Street to be fitted up with all modern conveniences are well near completion and will be ready for occupancy at an early date. The Mrs. Emma and Lillian Holt of Andover are visiting their aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Richard D. Prescott. The Page Hose Company of Ayer, who have been camping in Mr. Parrott's new cottage on the shores of Forge Pond, broke camp last Sunday. Miss Olive Prescott and Edward Prescott of Reading have recently visited their cousin, Miss Grace Lawrence. Mr. and Mrs. Everett Nichols and family of Malden are spending the rest of the season at their cottage on Forge Pond. Mrs. William Burnett and her grandson, Master William A. Longbottom of Lexington, spent Thursday at Revere Beach. The Mrs. Ella Donovan, Agnes Donovan, and Mary Ward of Roxbury are enjoying their vacation at the home of Mr. and Mrs. James Wilson. Mr. and Mrs. Frank Gardes, Gardes, of Boston, were also visitors of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson over Sunday. Miss Rose Dufort of Leominster, who recently underwent an operation for appendicitis at a private hospital, is visiting at the home of her sister, Mrs. Hugh Daly of Pond Street. Miss Ruth Griffin of Ayer was the guest of Miss Teresa Lowther last week Friday. William Bennett of Providence, Rhode Island, was the guest of his sister, Mrs. William Hosmer, née Jenny Bennett, and brother Joseph Bennett during the past week. Many from the village attended the birthday party given in honor of little Miss Florence Blodgett and her cousin, Master William Blodgett, at the Groton Ridge on last Saturday evening. A most delightful evening was spent in games, music, and dancing, which was thoroughly enjoyed by all present. The little tots were the recipients of many presents, also a mammoth birthday cake. At a late hour, the merry party broke up, all wishing little Florence and William many happy returns of the day. The visitors were conveyed to their homes in a large barge, which was a most enjoyable closing of the evening's entertainment. The rain of Tuesday was very welcome here and certainly was appreciated by all, especially those who cultivate their own gardens. Mrs. Maria Smith and daughter Fanny of Tingsboro were guests at the home of Mrs. Harriet Randall the first of the week. Mrs. Mary Drake entertained at her home over Sunday Mr. and Mrs. T.T. Holden of Yonkers, New York, and Mr. and Mrs. J.W. Howe of Lancaster. Miss Bertha Wilson visited friends in South Framingham last week. Mr. and Mrs. Smith of Pond Street entertained Mrs. Mary McCann of Yonkers, New York, and the Mrs. Hattie and Molly Mars of Lowell over Sunday. Mr. and Mrs. Frank Riney and Miss Alice and Miss Etta Sheehan of Lowell have been recent visitors here. That's the news from Westford for the week ending August 19th, 1911. Thank you for listening, and thanks to Ryan Cousins of Westford CAT for providing technical support. You can find transcriptions and podcasts from the Wardsman at our website at museum.westford.org or visit the Historical Society's Facebook page for more Westford news from days gone by. This is Bob Oliphant, and I hope you will join us for next week's Westford Wardsman podcast. Thank you.